am not a nutritional expert. I'm a singer. I don't sound like it today, but I am a singer, and it's because I am a singer that I am doing presently what I'm doing. About 4 years ago, I was constantly sick with recurring sinus infections, and I could not sing. 4 years ago, I canceled all my singing engagements but one. The Lord would not let me drop. And because I couldn't keep them, and I knew I couldn't, I was ill. Constant sinus infections, dripping on the cords, caused constant laryngitis. I could hardly talk, much less sing. So as I began praying, I said, Lord, you've given me a call to music ministry, and it's one I can't fulfill. Now that doesn't make any sense. There's got to be a reason why. And so I went to a homeschool conference. We're a homeschooling family. And I found these people over in a corner making bread. I was not interested. I was focusing on curriculum. But she was passing out packets. And as she passed them out, she mentioned to me there was no white flour and no white sugar in this bread. Well, as a divinely healed hypoglycemic who has studied a lot of nutrition in my hypoglycemic days, I knew that there was a lot of value in no white flour and no white sugar. She had produced a soft bread that I could not produce with white flour and whole wheat flour from the grocery store. And I was intrigued. So I sat in on her class that afternoon. Shortly thereafter, within a few weeks, got them to come to Athens so that my husband and another husband in the homeschool group could hear them. During this time of that year, 4 years ago, from January to March, we had spent almost $1,700 in doctors and pharmaceuticals. We have no health insurance. My husband is self-employed. This is a real burden when you're self-employed to come up with that kind of money. We had spent 6 weeks, myself and my 2 girls, inside with bronchitis. I'd never had bronchitis in my life. But our health had deteriorated to such a low level that we were susceptible to everything that came along, and bronchitis was the rock bottom. That's the worst it got for us. So, needless to say, I was very, very motivated to find some way to correct this problem. And when the people came to Athens, it was April the 12th. We bought a mill on April the 12th. And I'm here to tell you before God, the doctor was stopped that day. We didn't have any more. And because of that, I started going, now Lord, there's got to be a reason for this. And I want to know what it is. And God being God, who's such a great teacher, started leading me and guiding me into all truth. And it dealt with the bread. You can hear that a lot today. Scripture says that bread is the staff of life. And you know, I know that Scripture is literal as well as figurative. But many times we take figurative what really is literal. And in this case, it really is literal. Bread is the staff of life. But we're not comparing apples with apples if we're talking bread from the grocery store and fresh from the bread at home. And that's what we're going to discuss today. Everyone is hearing about fiber and the importance of fiber. And we all threw in the oat bran craze, and now we're all going through the cholesterol and the fat-free stuff. The nutritional experts don't all agree. Basically, they all agree that we need fiber, but they don't agree how we get it, because they all have different opinions. And so, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history of bread. And Rachel, if you would go in the file box and bring me those 2 NTIA things, they're under originals. Okay, they're in the back. When I first started asking the Lord for information, I came across some medical documents written by Christian doctors who do research on Scripture and why God told the Hebrew children to eat what He told them to eat. And it's what put my feet on the right path, because I really didn't know where to start at that point in time. And their institution is called the Medical Training Institute of America. And they researched the history of bread to some degree, and we later did more. But what they talked about is that man has always thought white bread. In ancient Egypt, your caste was known by the kind of bread you ate. It was only the really rich who could afford the slave power to sift out the bran and the germ and get the white flour. They liked that soft bread, just like we do. But what they didn't know, and what man has not known through the ages, is trying to improve on what God has provided, that they are actually doing harm to themselves. And so we read a book in the children's section of the Athens Library called The Bread Book. And it talks about in ancient Greece and Rome, bread was so important in Rome that they made the bakers put a mark on the bottom of the loaf so that it was not as heavy as it should be
give them the right amount, if they had cheated the people, they would find that back there, and then they would drag them through streets and let the people stone them. Bread was really, really important to every civilization except for present day, where we base our, or have in the past based our diet on meat. And then we found in the Middle Ages that one of the kings of England told that the populace, that the king and the clergy could have the white bread, and the nobility had to eat the sort of half-and-half stuff, and the peasants were stuck with brown stuff. Well, when the plagues came through, guess who died? The nobility died off because they had not fed themselves well. So before I go any farther, I want to talk to y'all about this, and I will pass these around. This is what grain looks like. It's wheat, okay? It's just in a shell. And when you break it up, this is cracked grain that's just been broken up. That's what's used in cow feed. They take off the outer husk, which is the bran, and they feed it also to the cows, or they sell it as Miller's bran for people who have regularity problems. And then they take the wheat germ and they separate it out. Wheat germ is very high in vitamin E oil, and so it goes rancid quickly. So they have to somehow press the oil out of that Newton's wheat germ that you see on the grocery store shelf. It couldn't sit there on the grocery store shelf if the vitamin E was filling it, because it would go rancid. It has to be refrigerated or frozen. This is vitamin E oil, which comes from the wheat germ. And when you take all of those out, this is what you have left, white flour. Now, what happened in the United States is that every person used to have their own grain, and they would take it every day to a local miller. And the miller would mill the grain, and then they would go back home and they would bake the bread. Until about 1920, when the Industrial Revolution really hit hard in the United States. And somebody came up with a wonderful invention called the steel rolling mills. And its job was to separate out those other four products and leave white flour. White flour lasted a long time, it didn't go rancid, it didn't mold, and the people liked the product that it produced. Well, the problem was that there was a huge outbreak of pellagra and beriberi, which are a lack of B vitamins. The health officials themselves traced this outbreak of pellagra and beriberi to the milling of the wheat. They went back to the millers and they said, would you be willing to reconsider what you're doing and go back to the old ways? And they said, no, we're selling crab grain and bran to one people, and we're selling the wheat germ to another people, and we're selling vitamin E to those vitamin companies, and we're selling white flour. We've got 5 businesses now instead of 1. We are not going back. So the answer was to fortify the grain with the 4 vitamins that prevent pellagra and beriberi. What they haven't told you is that you've lost 26. And so you are not as healthy eating the stuff from the grocery store as you are eating it when it's fresh milled. We know from Scripture that Joseph stored the grain for 14 years. He gathered for 7. He fed the people for 7. During that 14-year period, that grain didn't go anywhere. It didn't deteriorate. It didn't change. The grain is a unit, and that bran keeps it intact. And it's not until it is broken open to be used that the vitamins begin to be lost to the oxygen, which is called oxidation. When that happens, you start losing nutrients. Within 3 days, 72 hours, your nutrients are gone. 45% of them are lost in the first 24 hours. So it is something that happens quickly. Pellagra, I want to tell you, I want to say this right, so. Pellagra is a GI disturbance with skin and mental problems. Do you think we're rid of it? Anybody heard of psoriasis? Or eczema? Eczema is just a rash with undetermined cause. If they don't know what causes it, they're going to tell you have eczema. Beriberi is called a nervous disorder. I don't think we're really through with what they said they had healed. They haven't. And there's another interesting thing. If you have a lack of B vitamins and you take a B vitamin like a B6 or a B12, B vitamins have to be taken in proportion one to another. And you have to take the whole gamut of B vitamins. If you don't, they're going to take from your body the other B vitamins in order to be assimilated, because they have to be. They have to work together as a unit. That's the thing that happens with white flour and white sugar. They go searching for what has been refined away from them. They actually deplenish the nutrients in your body instead of feeding the nutrients in your body. Because what's been removed from it, it's going to take from your body if you're not giving it to your body in the food. You understand what I'm saying? So you're actually causing yourself to be malnourished. This is what I knew about white flour. When she told me there's no white flour, no white sugar in this, I was like, well, this is interesting. I want to know about this. See where I am. For 25 years, y'all remember the real white flour. Now they've come out with unbleached flour. Well, the thing that was used to bleach the flour was something called nitrogen trichloride. It's not used anymore. It was used for 25 years. Now a close cousin of it is used. But the British medical journal Lancet did research on this. They fed dogs white flour for 2 weeks. They said that some of them got the running fits, some of them so badly that some of them died. I don't know what the running fits are, but it sounds pretty serious to me. It also makes me wonder a little bit about hyperactivity in our children that we see so much today. And I definitely believe that it's part of it is what we're feeding them. I can't blame all of it on food, but I definitely think that's part of it. So I think it's interesting that we look back to daily bread, and that's what Jesus prayed. Lord, give us this day our daily bread. We want to store it and have it later. But Jesus said, give us this day our daily bread. And we're going to look at some of the reasons why in a little while. I'll try to talk and roll if I can. Let me just tell you that this is a double batch of the bread and rolls recipe. Did y'all all get the bread and rolls recipe sheet stapled together back there in the back? If you didn't, be sure you get one, because you'll want to make notes on it most likely. It doesn't matter, Chris, just stick them in there. Okay. Y'all can keep looking and getting your stuff while I talk. We are taping this, so if y'all have questions, if you would write them down and hold them to a break or the end, that would be a big help to me, and I'll do a question and answer time at the end. That just helps whoever gets this videotape concentrate a little better. So I believe that God has made a perfect food for our bodies. God designed our bodies. He knows how they're supposed to work. But just as man sinned in the garden because they thought that they knew better than the Lord, we really have sinned in the way that we eat. I don't want to sound condemning or anything like that. I don't mean that. And I don't mean you personally. I mean men in general in the way that they have looked at merchandising and marketing food. And I'll just to prove the point, think about the manna in the desert. Okay? God told them that He would provide for them every day, and they were to go out early every morning and they were to gather it. But some of them, I just read this again last night, some of them went out and looked on the day that God said it wasn't going to be, which was the Sabbath. He told them the day before the Sabbath that He would provide for them for 2 days, and it would not rot and it would not get worms in it that day. They were not to go out. Well, some people didn't obey God. And they went out the next morning to look for it. It wasn't there. And God was displeased with them. And He went to Moses and He said, why are they doing this? Didn't I tell them this is what it's going to be? And so then the people made peace with God and things went on there. But think about this. If there were some enterprising Egyptian who had come up with a way to hold manna over an extra day and not get worms in it, don't you think he'd have had a lucrative business? Don't you think somebody would have paid him to make their manna for them and they wouldn't have to get up early that morning and go do it? I think he would have had an
And Numbers tells us that manna was a grain. I always thought it was like popcorn, or that's what they showed me in Baptist Sunday school, that, you know, it's little fluffy stuff on the ground, or communion wafers or something like that. But no, came down with a cross on it. But Numbers said that it was a grain, that they took it and they put it in the hand mill and they ground it and they either baked it or boiled it. So, and it said that it tasted like honey cakes. And you know what the people did later? They complained. They didn't like it. They wanted meat. And then God gave them quail to the point that they were sick of it. So, and manna actually means that they didn't know what it was either. They said it looked like coriander seed. So, God's provision then was accepted joyfully at first, but later it was looked at as toil and labor, and the people didn't want to do it anymore. And I really think that is a large part of what's happened. Did you get some food? Come get some food. You don't want to sit all this time without eating lunch. You'll be starving. Okay, I'm just weighing out little bits of dough to get some sort of uniformity in the rolls, and we're going to make rolls. The reason that I'm doing this is because this is a basic recipe from which you can make many, many things. The last time I did this, somebody asked me, do you bake every day? I said, get real. No, I don't bake every day. I'm trying to bake every day. I homeschool, and I do all the things that a wife and mom does, and I drive to Dakota once a week, and I'm having this a long way. Now I'm involved in Christmas play rehearsals for myself and my children, so I don't have time to bake every day. But with one basic recipe, I'm just making a swirl. Can you see that? If you put your fingers together, it gets broader at the bottom, and then just go right down. You can make anything you want. You can make donut rolls, you can make Parker House rolls, you can make clover leaves, you can make them in muffins, 3 little balls stoked, they rise up together. You can make whatever you want. This is a really flexible dough. This is a Jewish bread. It's called challah, C-H-A-L-L-A-H, and it has eggs and rolls in it. Eggs and milk in it. And my kids make rolls too. If I get busy and I can't do, then they do. Did you make it tonight? So I make swirls because when I was trying to get them to tie donut rolls when they were real little, like she was about 7, she couldn't tie them, so we came up with swirls. I made bread with white flour from the grocery store and whole wheat flour, and what I got was a real coarse, crumbly loaf that my kids wouldn't eat. It would not make sandwiches. It fell apart, and I was not happy with that. So when I found this, which makes a real soft dough, I was real thrilled. And my kids liked it immediately. We have not had, I can't say, well, I personally have not had anybody turn down the dough, ever. I've never even had a child not eat the bread. Other friends of mine who've made bread said they've had kids turn down the bread. I personally have not. It is a really, really easy to make. And we're going to make 6 different things from this dough, this one batch of dough. This is the double recipe. It has 14 cups of flour. What some of the health benefits of this are, we're going to talk about them in length in a little while, but because they have all the fiber and everything in it, they are really good at cleaning people out. Okay? But we'll probably go a little more specific later, but I hate to shock you right off. And all we did when we made that change and the Dr. Bill stopped, all we did was put bread on the table. That's all we did. I did not go into all the things that I'm doing now. All I did was make the bread. That was a monumental task at the beginning because I was totally changing the way I looked at bread and what I did with it. And I put bread on the table every meal, and we ate bread. And within a very short period of time, my sinuses had cleared up, our bronchitis was gone. We did finish our medicine, but we didn't have to anymore. Period. America and Great Britain
Let me just give you a picture. The average entrance to exit time in the American diet is 96 hours. It should be 12 to 24. Because it takes so long, what happens is that your body reabsorbs toxins and it makes you ill. So America and Great Britain are the two most constipated nations on the face of the earth. Nobody eats like we do. And when they try, they become ill too. And we'll talk about that in a little while. But what happens is, I mean, you think about this. Diane told me to be sure to include this, so this made a nutritional note. If you took garbage and you dumped it into a corner of your room and you left it there day after day after day, are you going to want to live in that room?
Kids do.
No. Well, that's what you're doing to your body. Day after day after day. You're putting things in there, but there's no garbage dump. And you're living in that. And your body doesn't know what it should keep and what it shouldn't. Because what's sitting there, the body thinks that it's supposed to use, so it reabsorbs it. So this leads to all sorts of horrible diseases. I'm going to talk about a couple of them, and then I'm going to pass this around and let you look at it. Somebody made off with these last time, so whoever ends up with it, make sure you leave it with me so I don't have to try to call all you people and find out who has it. Give it to Tom, he said. These are the doctors. This is the Medical Training Institute of America, and these are the diseases that they traced to our lack of eating fresh mill bread. Okay, this is what we call mill bread. The stuff you get in the grocery store is the fake stuff. This is the real stuff. Constipation, appendicitis, diverticulitis, hiatal hernias, hemorrhoids, varicose veins, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, large bowel cancer, and gallstones are all directly related to the way we eat. We have a laxative industry that's thriving because we need them. We need them. We're a sick nation, and we really need their help. And that's why they've come along. Our energy level has increased since we've been on the bread. I have a friend who had warts on her children. She has now 7 children. By the time she was pregnant with number 5, every single child had warts. One so bad that it was pushing the fingernail off. Another one had them on her heel and couldn't wear her shoes. And the doctor had given them acid to drop on those things. And, you know, the child was screaming. Didn't even pull into the doctor's office parking lot, and the kids started screaming because they just didn't want to go in there and get any more acid. And it wasn't going away. They had $200 in health bills, doctor bills. They had more money in pharmaceuticals, and the warts were still there. They hadn't gotten rid of them. She started milling grain, and within 3 months, all of the warts were gone. She has a friend who does what we do in another section of the country, up near Washington, D.C., who has a friend who had a wart like a second thumb. All the doctors to whom she had been said that they couldn't do anything about it. This lady's husband was a doctor, and he looked at it and said, this is not my field, but in order to remove this, we would have to remove the thumb because of the way it's grown into the thumb. The wife remembered hearing something about vitamin E oil and it being in the bread and that being beneficial for warts, gave her friend 2 loaves of bread. She ate them, and by the second loaf of bread, the wart was gone. Warts are a virus. They are contagious, and they can spread. But there's something in the E that keeps them under control and stops them and makes you not susceptible to that virus. So we have none. Praise God. That's a real pain. Let's see, I want to make sure. When oils oxidize, I have another friend who was very ill, and friend of a friend who was very ill, couldn't eat any of all the food allergies that the doctors had told her she had were just endless, and there was very little she could eat. And later she got a meal, thought, what has she got to lose? The few things that she could eat, she could at least eat healthily, and found out that once she started eating the bread, that she was no longer ill, and she could eat all those things that the doctors had told her that she couldn't. What they later traced it down to was she was allergic to the rancid oils in the products that she was eating. Oils are rancid because they oxidize. oxidation in oil, it becomes rancid. That's what happens when oxidizes. The preservatives that they put in the food in the grocery store, you know what they are? They are synthetic antioxidants. That's what they are. BHT. These are synthetic antioxidants, which is what God has already put into the food. It's vitamin E, and we're going to talk extensively about vitamin E in this little while. Okay. I don't know if you can see this, but you see this and how I'm trying to move it. Can you see it, Trish? I don't do that anymore. All right, I'm going to make cinnamon rolls. One is cut open and one's not. I just changed lids, and that way one never leaks if it spills. I'm just going to use honey. This is clover honey. We are the grain co-op for Athens. We're also co-op in surrounding areas. And I also co-op honey orders out. And so we need to do honey orders soon. So if you are interested in raw honey, we'll just talk about honey for a second while I'm doing this. You know the cinnamon rolls that they make with cinnamon sugar and all? Well, we don't do sugar. We do honey. And you can do honey and cinnamon, and it works just as well. Tastes great. Makes it real, real soft. Woo! Okay, I'm going to sprinkle some cinnamon on this. You can sprinkle a little or as much as you want. I just try to do it kind of evenly coated. And I like nutmeg with my raisins, so I sprinkle nutmeg on it too. If you have another favorite spice, you can do it. Okay? And my raisins at Sam's. You can get them through the co-op, but I just don't have that much money in raisins when I go to Sam's and buy a bag. So we go through raisins first. We've made raisins in the dehydrator. There's a dehydrator over there. I'm going to talk about dehydration in a little while. Let me tell you something while I'm mentioning all these things. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. Remember, the very first and only thing I did was put bread on the table. If you have to choose one thing to do, put bread on the table. That is the most important thing to do. Over the course of 4 years, God has sort of led me into other things. And I'll share them with you, hopefully, to be inspiring and not to be intimidating. That's not my desire whatsoever, is to intimidate. Can we use one of those DLX? Could I have one of them? I'm going to grind up some nuts for some girls. While I'm waiting for the DLX, I want to just kind of walk y'all through this. You can actually, I'll just pack it and let you see it. And you can look at some of this caption and see what you stop or say about it.
Glitter?
Glitter. Needs glitter. Okay. Honey. Got one on it too. How the abuses of sugar endanger the basis of health. They wrote one on it too. The people who tell you there's no difference between honey and sugar don't know what they're talking about. These are the identified ingredients in honey by these doctors. Can you see how small that type is and how much there is on the page? Honey is sucrose. It has nothing in itself to metabolize itself. It has to raw from your body to do that. Honey has everything in it that is necessary to metabolize itself. For diabetics, it helps you to assimilate slowly, much more slowly, the food that you get. It has a levulose in it. It's one of the highest. It's listed right up here. It's a fructose, but it's a little more complex compound. And levulose has antibacterial qualities. It will actually, when poured on bacteria in the lab, kills it. So it feeds your body with good stuff. And the Bible talks about honey. It's impossible to eat too much honey. He says, don't eat too much honey lest you vomit it. So there's a filling point with honey. There's not with sugar. Sugar just continues to feed a craving to eat and to eat and to eat. Because what you're craving are the things that it's robbing from your body to make it assimilate. Your body's trying to fill that hole back up, and it can't do it, not with sugar, because sugar's not giving anything back. Kind of sounds like a thief that robs, you know. The DLX is right here. I'm gonna pour these in. I love this blender. This is my bread center, my kitchen center that I'm using here. Turn on its side. It runs the blender. It has a safety cap. I'll show it to you in a while. But you know how most blenders have that little cup thing at the bottom and everything is stuck down it and you've got to stop and dig it out and toss it back up? Not in this way. It's flat. If I kept letting this go, it would actually make walnut butter. Whoever has walnut butter, well, they're going to make some extra cinnamon rolls back there in the back, so I've got some extra here. I don't normally do this many. I have a daughter who will not eat nuts. She'll eat them ground, but she won't eat, she'll eat the nut if you hand it to her, but she won't eat it in anything. So I started grinding the walnuts to fool her. Now she knows what I do. But it's still a nice texture for the cinnamon roll. So stick that on there. There's your roll. And I'm going to roll them up. I go from long end to long end. The short ends are on the edges. And just fold it. Let me walk here. Okay. Pinch the ends closed. And kind of squish it. And I'm going to squish it out. This won't make enough for this many people, so we're going to make it back in the kitchen. So just kind of squish it out until it's in a tube. And you can cut them, but it's smooth, and I don't like that. So if I can find it, aha, I use dental floss. I do not wax my teeth or clean my teeth with this particular strand of dental floss. Okay. This is kitchen only. And then you just cut them. And they don't smash. You see that? It's really kind of fun to do this way. Did y'all get the orange Danish? Were they good? After we started reading and I started studying on this, I get into more and more because I look at that stuff, I read that package in the grocery store and go, I can't do this. Just can't do this. It's against my convictions. I can't do this to my family. And then I start looking for a way to substitute it. And when I do, then I start playing and experimenting, and that's the recipes that are in the back. I'm currently working on a cookbook. It's a work in progress. It is not by any means complete. But 4 years worth of experimenting and taste testing by my family have gone into it. And some categories are not represented, and some are very, very shy being represented. All right, Rachel, y'all can do the rest of it here on that tray.
You got the ribbons in there, right?
Yes, the ribbons are in there. You like that ribbon?
Yeah, I did. I watched them. He likes them.
That and the garlic
Just-
bread stick.
Yeah, okay. That's it.
Listen here.
Okay.
Okay. Let me look at my notes for a minute so I don't leave anything out. Vitamin E is abundant in fresh milk range. It's not in the grocery store. And, oh, I have this same friend, took her children to Dr. Denmark. Do any of y'all know who Dr. Denmark is? She's a 98-year-old physician who's practicing in the Norcross area in Gwinnett County. She's amazing. She's been written up nationally like 3 or 4 times. And Susan had picked up whooping cough. And even if you're immunized against whooping cough, you can still get it. And I did not know that. But she took him to Dr. Denmark. She didn't want to put him on antibiotics. But Dr. Denmark said to her, this is one you don't play with. We do antibiotics for this one. And she did. But when she looked at her children she looked at her 4-year-old, and Lydia didn't have any tonsils. They were gone. And she hadn't had her tonsils removed. And she went, wow. And then she went over to David, his
9, and she looked in David's mouth, and she said, well, he didn't have something either. And she asked if they had tonsillectomies, and she said no, and she said, well, if the adrenal glands are really, really healthy, and if you know anything about the body, you know that the adrenals help, that's where what you need to build up for your immune system. If your adrenals are really, really healthy, the tonsils are not needed, and at a certain point in time, they will atrophy and go away. But we never see it in today's society. Dr. Denmark, 98, has been practicing for like 45 years, 50 years, something like that, and she had seen it a long time ago, but had not seen it in any children recently, and she was amazed. Well, they live like we do, with Whole Foods and million-grown grains, and we basically don't live out of the grocery store. That sounds real back to nature, Mother Earth type thing, but look at me. I'm not a Mother Earth type. I'm an artsy-fartsy person. We do a garden. I dehydrate what I can. The only thing I really can anymore is salsa, because my family likes mine better than the grocery stores. And we buy what we can as naturally as we can. I try to clean things as well as I can. I'll talk about, I wash some vegetables with soap and water. I don't wash all of them. Some things you can't wash with soap and water. If you can't squeeze a fresh lemon into some water, use it on things like lettuce and stuff like that. It's the best cleansing thing that you can do, short of soap and water. Organic is not always necessarily better if we're talking cleanliness, because organic is usually fertilized with things like goose dung. Not real neat and clean. And so you do need to be real careful with organic too. You'll pay a higher price for organic because they get a smaller yield per acre, and so they have to charge more. Speaking of organic, I've just made friends with some people in the Athens area who are growing pasture-raised chickens. They're not fed any antibiotics, growth hormones, steroids, and or arsenic. And they have a yellowy, golden flower back there. Pick one up. They've got lots of chickens. You'll be able to get them fresh every week starting in April. Right now, their chickens don't do well in the winter, so they're doing the last of their chickens. They're kosher. They're dripped. And if you don't know what I mean by that, see me later. And they're really, really good. They have so much more flavor than the chickens from the grocery store. I thought I was doing really well to buy Purdue. One lady said to me, you eat Purdue, this is at the Georgia Taste Testing Night, you eat Purdue chicken, they eat bugs. And I said, but God made them to eat bugs, so it's okay, so they're clean. Yeah, there's Rachel's home over flowers. So if you didn't get one, it's the only colored one back there. Be sure you get one. Okay. Buddy, can you bring me the coconut and apple powder, please? Apple powder? Yeah, apple powder.
You know how long it takes a chicken, full grown chicken out today?
8 weeks.
6 weeks. That's how, when they come in as a baby, they come to the butcher shop in 6 weeks.
Well,
That's
they're
it.
not healthy. I mean, I think one of the reasons why we see 14-pound babies is growth hormones that we eat. I have an MD friend who told me that we no longer used to be, you could give people just a few grains of antibiotics and they were well, but because we ingest so much antibiotic, we now give megadoses, doctors give megadoses of antibiotics to people, because we've built up a tolerance to it. We're eating them, and our bodies are used to them, so they don't respond to them as well. I'm going to talk for just a second, and then I'm going to go back to bread so I don't miss anything. The scripture that you'll see that I put down on the flyers and you constantly see me use is, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Several years ago, when I started praying about this, I asked the Lord, I started reading the New Testament again, and I asked God to open my eyes to things. And one thing He opened my eyes to was daily bread. The second thing He opened my eyes to was that Jesus didn't say man cannot live on bread alone. He said man should not. You can, but you shouldn't. Well, you can if you're eating this kind of bread. But the NCI doctors say, if you are on a desert island and all you have is store-bought bread, make your peace with God because you're going to see Him real soon. That it has nothing to do with daily life.
will not sustain life in and of itself. So we see a sick church all the time. And this is what has motivated me to do what I now do, because I think that we're living in the last days. And if we are, God said the fields are white to harvest. And if they are, then there need to be workers for the harvest. Doesn't he say to pray for workers for the harvest? But you can't go work if you're sick. And you can't look out for other people. You can't be others focused if you have to spend time being you focused. I spent a year being me focused because I was sick all the time and I hated it. And I'm so much happier now that I'm well and I can be focused on others and hopefully get them well. And if Jesus is coming soon, we have a lot of people to talk to. We have a lot of people to sow into their lives. We can't afford to be bedridden or sick or unable to go because we just don't feel good. So Jesus saw the same thing. This is Matthew 9:35. And Jesus was going about all the cities and villages, teaching in the synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every kind of disease and every kind of sickness. Because the children, it says, seeing the multitude, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed, downcast, like sheep without a shepherd, harassed and sick. And we're seeing a sick church. We are a sick nation for the most part. We have the best doctors in the world, bar none, no argument. But we need them too much for simple things. We should be able to. I have friends who were missionaries to Siberia, and people over there are just, we take headache powders like it's candy. People over there, they don't expect to feel perfect all the time. They are just amazed at the American mentality of ibuprofen and Tylenol and Bufferin and aspirin. And we have so many different kinds. It's not even that we just have one. We have multitudes to choose from because we're sick. They don't eat like we do, and they're not as sick. Jesus said that we need to put the axe to the root of the tree, and we spend our time picking the fruit off. And we never ever get down to what really is causing this. Let's uproot this plant and get it over with and pull it up. For the most part, our medical doctors, wonderful though they are taught to treat symptoms and not the disease. And nutritionally, I love my doctors. I have lots of doctor friends, but I've known enough of them to know that they don't take nutrition courses. Nutrition is an option in medical school, and most of them opt out. And so they don't know anything about preventative medicine. Preventative medicine has come into its own, and more people are looking at a way to prevent illness in the last 5 years, probably than ever before in the United States, because we're so sick, we need it. And bread, I really believe that bread treats the root. Now, I have lots of friends who are into supplements. I occasionally take supplements too. But I won't say this about supplements because people ask me about it all the time. When my kids are sick, I have the vitamin C. Dr. Linda Smith, who wrote Feed Your Kids Right, is probably the only published MD I know of who really talks about diet having an effect on children and rates their levels 1 through 4 according to their sickness and how they're born and all that sort of stuff. Says that whenever you know your child's going to be under any type of stress, to up their vitamin C. So I do. When we get sick, man, I give them vitamin A and I give them garlic and the whole thing. Yes, I do. But every day, no, I don't. Number one, supplements are expensive. Number two, people forget them. If you base your entire health on a pill, I think, number one, you've lost the focus on God's information. Number two, I think that you're dependent on someone other than God for your health. And number three, if an economic crisis comes to this country, you're not going to be able to buy what's keeping you healthy. People forget to take supplements, but they don't forget to eat. So my philosophy is do what Jesus talked about. Whenever in question, I go back to the Word. Okay, God, what'd you say? People told me cinnamon is an irritant. Don't use it. But if you look in Scripture, God talks about cinnamon as a flavoring and as an incense. I said, okay, God, you use it as flavoring. Okay, I can use it too. And so I do. This is apple powder. My mom has apple trees, and we dehydrate apples in apple rings, which I'll pass around and y'all taste. And then we just pop them in the blender and pop them up. Everybody heard of date sugar? Date sugar is dehydrated dates that they grind up. It's a sugar substitute. Well, this is apple sugar. It's concentrated. And we just
sprinkle it on the bread. This is one of my kids' favorite breads, is apple powder bread. You can do this with fresh apples. It's a little gooier because they're wet. It's a little harder to manage. And is anybody here absolutely cannot abide coconut in any way, shape, or form? No? Oh, wonderful.
Let them taste real coconut first.
He doesn't like coconut. No today. Ray, did you bring me the coconut? Oh. These are apple rings. I did these last year, in the season. This year's haven't done too well. She taught me how to taste that. Those are Granny Smith's or Mutsu's. I'm not sure which. This is coconut. Do you see anything different about this coconut when you go in the grocery store? My brown flakes in it. We buy coconuts at Harry's. They're like 39 cents a coconut. Poke the ice pick in the ice, turn it upside down, and drain it. And then, hey, Kathy, come get some food. I will. And then we just pop it with a sledgehammer. Hammer won't, it just bounces off. Just take a 3-pound sledge, tap it lightly, or it'll be smithereens.
2 hammers or a wedge, put one on top, hit the oven,
Okay,
snaps
he
right
does
up.
it. And then we just pop it out. The brown stuff is not bitter, so you don't have to, you just take a knife and pry it away from the shell. The brown stuff's not bitter, so you don't have to get rid of it. I'm sure it has some sort of nutrients in it that God only knows. So we use it. And I just sprinkle it on the top.
Very scientifically.
Now, I'm going to pass this around with a spoon so y'all can take some out and stick it in your hands and let you taste it. This is very different from that sweet stuff in the grocery store. My kids won't touch the sweet stuff in the grocery store. They think it's nasty. And but this has a very nutty flavor to it. You understand why. It really is the coconut. In America, we've made coconut a dessert instead of a nut. But it is a nut. And that tastes like nuts. And once again, I'm just going to roll it up. Cinnamon, sugar. Oh, if you like apple pie, you can put allspice in this too. Allspice is good. Now, I'm going to grate this, so I'm going to squish it out real tight. And there are a couple reasons why I grate. If you notice the Reuben bread and the sausage bread gets kind of holes in it, you know, I had to roll it up. It's so full that I couldn't grate it. And the dough is a lot thicker because it's a French bread that I was using for those sandwiches. But have you ever seen homemade raisin bread that has gaps between the swirls? Well, if you grate it, you don't get those. Plus, you get a much better mixture of flavorings. And, you know, it's kind of marbled and woven throughout the dough, so I like that. I'll try to do this so that y'all can have a glimmer of what I'm doing. I make a Z or an S, whichever way I happen to start, and then I just cut it at the edges and make 3 pieces. Okay? Then I'm going to stretch it a little bit more. And you just spread it like right here. I'm also going to pinch those ends in a little bit. How's the coconut? Good. And I'm braiding it. I start about half and braid half of it, and then I braid the rest backwards. If you can't braid backwards, you can turn it around and face it, have it face you. And I need a bread pan. Okay, I'll hold it up. See that? Great. And it will rise up. I do a triple rise bread for a couple of reasons. One, I like the texture it gives me, but two, the MTIA doctors talk about there's something called phytates. Now, I'm not a biochemist, okay? I just know what I read. There's something called phytates, which inhibits the absorption of some of the minerals in which Americans are very low, like zinc and manganese and magnesium and chromium, if you can get chromium in your diet, which most of us don't. And so, if you do a triple rise bread, somehow this inhibits that, the phytates from stopping your absorption of those things. So I do triple rice bread. If you don't have time and you're absolutely in a pinch, you can do a similar stuff.
All of those minerals are involved in the prevention of prostate cancer.
Well, there's so much that's involved in prevention of cancer. We're going to talk about that too. We'll get these going and then we'll talk for a little while because we're going to eat these and I need them to start rising. So, y'all think y'all going to leave here hungry? I hope not. Okay. This is going to be crazy walnut bread. You can use any dried fruit that happens to fit with you, but I gave Diane a choice today since she had to coordinate this class, and she said, well, time of year, let's use cranberries. So, craisins are dried and sweetened. I haven't played with drying cranberries yet. I plan to do that. But that's one of those things around which I have yet to get. You notice that I used to use a rolling pin, but a rolling pin takes 2 hands, and you really need to hold the dough. So I've gone to a pastry roller, which my husband makes by order. He has several orders in right now that he's going to get to shortly. Pardon me? Well, we couldn't find one. I had seen one that a friend had that...
They're small ones. They're too small.
The only one that I had seen a friend had, and she got it from her grandmother, and it was wonderful. But you know, you can't go out and buy those. So Tom looked at it and said, I can make that. So he did. And it's been wonderful, because I use it all the time. The other day, I had done so much roll down. My shoulder was sore that night. Okay. These are craisins. I bought these at Kroger. And nothing goes on this bread but craisins and walnuts. You can use pecans. I use apricots, dried apricots. Apricots are probably my favorite. I like these too. Whatever. We've dried our own grapes, and they're really, really good. A dehydrator is a good way to save all money. Okay. These are the walnuts. I'm going to braid this one too. We'll do 3 braided bread in the sandwich bread. Let y'all just taste plain old sandwich bread. I do not braid my sandwich bread because it bugs my youngest daughter that it went like this on top. And her sandwich, you know, she wanted her sandwich to go like that. So I said, okay, fine. Less work. So I don't braid them anymore. Sandwiches. That was when, before I got smart about the nitrates and was still buying sandwich meat, you know, and the sandwich meat was curved and her bread went like this. She was like that. I don't do sandwich meats anymore. All sandwich meats have nitrates in them. I'll tell you what a naturopath, Christian naturopath I heard. Naturopath is someone who simply believes in healing someone by treating them with diet first. And he said that silver nitrates turn into something called nitrosin, which is a poison gas. And when you feed your family something that has been heated, that has nitrates in it, you are feeding them poison. Small doses of it, to be sure. They put it into most things that contain pork, at least that was where they started, because of trichinosis. And things that cooked quickly, they could not be assured would kill the trichinosis. Trichinosis can withstand 500-degree temperature. So they started putting the nitrates in. Bacon has it, hams have it, things like that. Well, now all the turkey ham has it, and the turkey bacons have it. And so I just don't buy it. Stretch it one more time. Whoop! Well, we're going to feed something on the floor. Well, I haven't really gotten that far, to be honest with you. I'm still working on it, but I'm planning on using some of these chickens and things. The kitchen center has a meat grinder, and so we've been making, I'm going to start making things with it. And just recently, I didn't have time to add it to the recipe list before we, there's another brand like, but I did a chicken hot pot the other night with the whole wheat pastry dough. Oh, it was great. Okay. You might find a little nuts or raisins in this next one, but We dried by day onions a couple of years ago, and Tom told me the next year we were going to buy 25 or 50 pound packets. Well, because they taste wonderful. They're kind of like, they don't taste like onions. They're real, real sweet when you dry them. And they kind of taste like those jerky French fried onions, you know? And you could use them for that, but we ate them like potato chips. They didn't want them on. I had saved one little bit. That's all I've got. And I'll pass it around and let y'all taste it.
What we
About half that. This is red. What we've got. Anybody wants more garlic breadsticks? So we're over here. Since the question's been asked, I'll try to tell you a little bit about wheat. There's red wheat, which is what this is. There's white wheat, which is what this is, the garlic breadsticks are. Have biscuits? They're here. We need to have one. The white wheat is milder. The red wheat has a more of a whole wheat flavor to it, that nutty kind of robust flavor that you associate with whole wheat. When I'm using something like the garlic breadsticks, where I really want the garlic to stand out, I use white, because I don't want to compete with the flavors. When I have something that I am not going to do that with, we can taste, I'm putting a whole lot of flavors and stuff in the red, and you'll see. Some people just like the red, some people just like the white. I play with both. There's spring wheat and there's winter wheat. Spring wheat, if I can get this right, spring wheat is harvested in the fall. And winter wheat is harvested in the spring. Its growing season is through the winter. And then there's soft wheat and there's hard wheat. Soft wheat does not have any gluten content to it to speak of. That's what we grow here in the South. Soft wheat will not grow in a place that is heavily rained all the time, because the irrigation has something to do with the gluten content. It only grows where there's cold, dry weather, which is why the Midwest is great to call the breadbasket of America, because that's the kind of weather that they get. And so soft wheat will make biscuits and pancakes, but it won't make bread. Hard wheat makes bread. That's why the North is known for its bread, and we're known for biscuits and bread, because we can grow it down here. You have to point that extra stuff off. Please feel free to get up if you decide that you can't sit any longer, and I will try to move as quickly as I can. My father's a military colonel, and he has a saying that I think is quite funny. He says, the mind can only absorb what the fanny can endure. If you get fanny fatigue, please feel free to stand up and move around. Walk back the range. You'll use that in the future, right, Mom? Okay, these are minced onions. I'm going to sprinkle them on top of the stove. No, these are just minced onions. I don't have enough ideas left to do this anymore. Wish I did. But remember, I told you my family ate the white potato chips. They did. They're not there anymore. And I need a paper towel. Okay. Then, this is some of the things that I've dried, and we'll hopefully go into dehydration a little bit more in the future. A little bit later. She's got biscuits. Those are made with white wheat. And that is a hard wheat. We all got to do those in cinnamon. Parsley, can you see how green this is? Now, this happens to be next to the light, and the light bleeds nutrients out and it gets golden colored, okay? But this side, if I actually stirred it up to the center, when you first try parsley, it's a deep emerald green. It's just beautiful. The stuff that you get in the grocery store is kind of a silvery green, and that's for two reasons. One, it's been a long time from picking to harvesting it and to, whatever they have to do to dry it, to bottling it. The bottling goes to a warehouse where it sits and cooks in those bottles for a long time before it ever reaches your grocery store shelf. So, it leaches so many of the nutrients out of it. This, I'll pass this around, this has a real green smell, and it's kind of like, I don't know. You ever eaten green beans that are just barely cooked, you know, that real green taste? Well, this has just a real green smell. And I just kind of crush this up and stick it on the bread. This is my favorite. This is herb bread. And I love it. You can get, I have a parsley plant. An herb garden is a cheap and easy thing to do. The deer don't like herbs. They don't eat them. They'll eat everything else. I mean, they'll eat your flowers down to the ground, but they won't eat the herbs. And I think they have too distinct a smell or something. I don't know. But anyway, y'all can smell this. And then this is dill. I have dill. I have not successfully grown dill, but I got this at Harry's, the farmer's market in Atlanta, in Gwinnett, and they sell herbs for pretty cheap there. And I just, whenever they're having a sale, and I see it when I'm there, I buy, and I go home and dry. Cilantro, they sell sometimes. The last time I was there, 2 huge batches for 89 cents. I brought it home and dried it. I'll use it in salsa when I make salsa next year. I used some in salsa this year. Okay. Dill up. Dill. This is my favorite.
Are you the dehydrated for all those herbs?
Yeah, I'll talk dehydration in a little while. You can smell that. That's wonderful. Okay, and then I'm just going to roll this up and braid this again. Okay. And we've got one more, and then I'm going to talk nutrition for a while this dries. I highly recommend an herb garden if you don't have one, even if you just use it fresh, you know, if you don't have a dehydrator yet. I will tell you a little bit about the dehydrator. It's sitting right over there in the corner. It's 10 trays. It will dry about a half bushel at a time. It's one of the largest on the market. I have to tell you, I have the machines that I have because I bought them as a consumer. And the people from whom I bought them started talking to me, and they found out my nutritional background being a heel hypoglycemic, and they asked me if I would be their person in Athens to do this. I had already been through the research on the machines and looked at several and come to the conclusion that these were the best on the market. So I didn't get these machines to sell. I got them to use because I believed that they were the best. We'll talk about the mill in a little while. The dehydrator has 10 trays. You can use 1, or you can use 2, or you can use all 10. It has mesh inserts. I'll get it out and show it to you in a second. It costs about 4 cents an hour to run. It's really, really cheap to use. And it's something that my children do. My children can't can or freeze because you have to blanch stuff in boiling water, or you have to use a water bath. And I don't want my kids around boiling water because I don't think it's safe. So I have one of those little manual slicers, you know, it's a V thing, and it has a little cut, and you do this. So when we do tomatoes or apples or anything like that, when we do anything like that, we do them on that so that they're all the same thickness, and they dry at the same time. Takes about 3 or 4 days for tomatoes. If it rains, it takes longer, because you're trying to remove water, you know, and it's so humid here in the South. That's very difficult to do. Apples take about 2.5 to 3 days. Herbs will take an hour. Coconut take an hour, hour and a half. Doesn't take long at all. They come. See, there's the tray. I always use the mesh inserts. I never ever don't use them, because if apples stick to this or tomatoes, I do this and they come off. If I do this, I'm doing this with a spatula and they stick. They have a bumpy side, and you put the bumpy side up. And then this is for fruit leathers. You know, they have fruit leathers in the grocery store, and they are neon colors. And one bottle said glow in the dark. And I talked about this with a friend. We couldn't decide if the child was supposed to eat it in the dark closet or if it was supposed to glow inside of them, but whatever. on its last leg and it's ready to toss it in your blender, blend it up, spray this with Pam first, and pour about 3/4 to a cup onto a grit blender tray, and then dry them. And you don't lose money, and your kids have healthy snacks. Canning retains 20 to 30% of your nutrients, freezing 40 to 60. Dehydration retains 95 to 97%. So you have a lot. This is the oldest way to preserve food. Man has been drying longer than they've been doing anything else. They dry, they salt, they smoked, but long before refrigeration and canning came into vogue. Okay. Diane, could you get my scissors out of the kitchen and cut up some fruit letters and pass them around? I'm not sure what these are. This is mystery letters. Usually there's apple in them. Sometimes there's pear or, one daughter loves blueberries. They smell like pear. I don't know, she I don't eat them. Too sweet for me. Pear. Okay, we have made them all. I hope you saw what I did to the sandwich bread. It was virtually nothing. It's very easy to make. I'm going to move some of these out of the way. And we're going to do muffins. I'm missing something with a live mouth lid. Anybody? You find it? Yeah, here. Woo! I'm not usually this spread out. I'll try to come back to dehydration in a little while. Now that I've got some time while those are rising, I want to talk y'all some nutrition and talk nutrition and go to the word a little bit. If you're interested in nutrition and anything, this is the time to get out your pencils. Okay, we talked about our doctors not studying. Oh, did you know that that our pharmaceutical companies are the ones who publish our medical journals? Is that it doesn't mystify you when you know that as to why we have a pharmaceutically based medicine in this country. Because they're the ones who publish our medical journals, so that's the kind of medicine that they're going to underwrite. We go to a charismatic church which believes in healing, and I heard this Christian naturopath speak, and he made a comment that really made me sit up and take notice. He said, our charismatic friends are wrong. And he said, they go and they get prayed for healing, but they never ever treat what made them sick in the first place. And this is an insult to God, because we go to him, we ask him to heal us, and then we have to go back to him because we've never taken care of what made us sick in the first place. And that made a lot of sense to me. And God was already speaking to me about the bread, and I saw the correlation between the two. Let's talk about some of those diseases that we talked about. Constipation happens to lead to the majority of those other diseases. Have any of you ever heard of Dr. Dennis Burkitt? He's a medical missionary to Africa. Came back, and a lot of his writings and his findings have been what has led the medical community into looking at the importance of fiber. He came back and spoke to our medical community. Never ever saw a case of appendicitis in 20 years of practicing in Africa, except one time. And it was in a black man. And he went and told his black workers in the mission hospital there that this guy had a hot appendix and it needed to come out. And the mission people said to him, that's white man's disease. We don't have that. And they laughed at him. And he said, I'm telling you, this guy's got a hot appendix. It's got to come out. They went to the young man and they asked him, where have you been and what have you been eating? And he said, I've been in the United States for 4 years, studying at one of their universities, and sure enough, his appendix had to come out. That is the only case of appendicitis we saw in 20 years in Africa. Africans eat a very high fiber diet. They eat a high diet that's high in sorghum. Sorghum will absorb 50% of the carcinogens in your diet. Grain fiber will absorb 20% and take them out. And we're going to talk about how in just a few minutes. Peristalsis controls the intake of water and the outgo of water in your intestines. Your intestines are where your nutrient transfer takes place. So many
Americans have so much sludge in their diets with refined foods that it coats their intestines and it blocks the ability, the docking places for nutrient transfer to take place, and they're actually starving themselves nutritionally by what they're eating because the nutrient transfer cannot take place. If there's no fiber in your diet, there's nothing to trap the water, and therefore you have hard stools. If there's no fiber in your diet, the peristalsis is not going to pull water into the intestine and trap it. The fiber, there are two kinds of fiber in grains. There's soluble fiber and there's insoluble fiber. Insoluble fiber is that Miller's brand. It's that broom brush cleaner is going to go through and make you move. But my husband is the contractor, and if he stands at this sheetrock wall and he sands it, and he sands it, and he sands it in the same place, what's going to happen?
Where's that?
It's going to have a hole, right? Well, when they extract fiber and tell you to add it back in your diet, that's what happens. It becomes an irritant, and you have people who get spastic colons because they have taken an extracted fiber that was never meant to be extracted, and they've taken it and they've eaten it for health. But what they don't know is that God put the fiber together with the soluble fiber. Soluble fiber makes a jelly-like mass, and it traps toxins, and it coats the insoluble fiber so that this insoluble fiber goes through and keeps doing what it's supposed to do, which is cleaning you out, but it doesn't abrade your insides in doing it. So when you take extracted fiber, all you get is that rough cleansing, which irritates your insides and gives you spastic colon. But if you take it together the way that God made it, God is so smart, you know, and we just clue in. We get a problem, and then we start looking. And God knew it all along. He created it, and we find that we have done something by changing it. My rule of thumb is eat it as close to the way that God made it as you can. Man thinks they're improving on God, but they're not. What they find out is 20 years down the road, it's a price tag to what they've done trying to improve on God's creation. You can't improve on God. He's a magnificent creator and very, very wise. So your stools pass through, you're cleaned out more quickly, and all that stuff doesn't sit around polluting and being reabsorbed into your body. So you don't have as many diseases. We've talked about, oh, this just amazed me. And I had a friend who does have a minor in biochemistry and told me this recently. She had postnasal drip all the time and took antihistamines just, all the time, routinely. Somebody who was in the medical profession came up and talked to her, and she was saying that after she started eating the bread, that she no longer had the postnasal drip. And he said to her, were you constipated? And she said, well, yeah. Somebody you don't know real well, you don't know how personally you want to get to them. And he said, well, that makes perfect sense, because the nutrient transfer takes place here, but if you're all clogged up and you're reabsorbing the toxins, your secondary place of elimination is your nose.
Whoa.
And so all that stuff comes up here to be trapped in the mucus and blown out. And what do? We stop it up. And we sit there and reabsorb it again in the second place. And after having multiple sinus infections, I was just like, oh wow, because I quit having them when I started eating the bread. Appendicitis we've talked about, so I won't go back through that. Diverticulitis. I have an aunt-in-law who is diverticulitis and just miserable with it. It is directly related to constipation. What happens is that the intestines are working so hard to move this hard mass through that they cannot do it. That a little polyp is formed off of it. This is the wall of your intestine. It will form a polyp here. And then fecal material gets trapped in here, and it causes extreme pain. The only way to get rid of it is to remove part of your intestinal tract. The polyps never go away as far as we know. So diverticulitis is really, really serious and incredibly painful. Well, we add back extracted fiber, which we talked about being very harsh and very hurtful to your insides. I have another friend who made this bread for a man who had diverticulitis, a friend of hers. And he came back to her and gave it to her. She gave it to him at a Georgia football game. He came back and gave her a great big kiss on the cheek the next week and said, I had the best week of my life. And she said, okay. And he said he had diverticulitis, and he'd been going to the health food store and buying all these expensive additives and making his own bread. And but all he had done that week was eat the bread. And that he had the best week of his life. And he wanted, whatever it was she was doing, he wanted to do it too. 35% of cancer in this country is caused by diet. It is preventative. But unfortunately, our medical community has not really been looking at how it can be prevented. Has anybody ever heard of something called Electrolux? Does anybody know what it was used for?
Cancer.
My grandmother died on a plane going to Mexico for Electrolux treatment for cancer. The United States government outlawed it and said that it could not be used. I don't want to tell you why in just a minute. It is known as, in the biochemistry world, as B17. There are two sources of B17. One is millet, and the other one is buckwheat. Most of our grains used to have B17, but because our grains are now hybrids, the B17 has been bred out. So Americans do not get a lot of B17. I want to show you millet, and you tell me where you've seen it before. This is millet. No, not tattoo. Bird seed. We feed it to the birds. Millet is a complete protein. It has all 8 essential amino acids. It is an alkaline grain. We have a very high acidic diet in the United States because we eat too much sugar and white flour. And it's very, very healthy. I add ½ cup to 7 cups whenever I make the bread and rolls recipe, up the protein content of the bread and add in some good food. There is a country, a tribe in Africa that grinds up apricot pits. Apricot pits are high in B17. No cancer in those people. Never has been. No documented cancer. We have cancer everywhere. The bottom line of the legislation to outlaw Electrolux, which I found very interesting since my grandmother had died on a plane to try to get it, said the government is responsible to protect man, even from himself. Now, wait a minute. Let's put a different slant on this. On the other hand, the government said, that's a woman's body, and she has a right to do with it whatever she wants. Now, does that sound like opposite sides to you? It does to me. I just thought I'd throw that one in there. We see now, cancer used to be rare, and heart disease used to be rare. In the early 1900s, Johns Hopkins said that they expected to see 1 case of angina pain a year. Now it's 1 out of 2 cases, 1 out of 3 cases. Something's happened since 1900 that's causing our health to deteriorate and disease to rise. And I really think it is definitely related to what we eat. 86% of most diseases that plague the United States could be virtually eliminated by a change in diet. And I want to show you that God says something about this. I found this really interesting. This is the time. God bless you. This is 2 Kings 4:40. And I'll set this up for you. Elisha had gone to Gilgal because there was famine. And he was coming back. There was a school of the prophets. And one of the young men saw this gorgeous gourd. And he brought it home and he cut it up and put it in the pot to pretty it up. And when they sat down to eat it, this is what happened. So they poured it out for the men to eat. And it came about as they were eating of the stew that they cried out and said, "Oh my God, there's death in the pot." And they were unable to eat it. But Elisha said to them, "Bring meal." And he threw it in the pot and he said, "Pour it out for the people that they may eat. There is no harm in the pot." The grain is sorely carcinogen. It is sorely poison and that is sacred to humans. Now, I'm not denying the miraculous factor of God's hand in there on this prophet, please understand. But remember, Scripture can be taken literally as well as figuratively, and God said, "Take meal and put it on the pot." And it was sorely ill. And we have death in the pot in America. We have additives, we have flavor enhancers, we have color enhancers, we have elastic enhancers. I don't know what all we put in there. I do, one of my friends used to work for Kraft Foods, and there are 3 things that the food companies put into your food because they're appetite stimulants. 1 is caffeine, 2 is salt, and 3 is sugar. They're in just about everything that you buy from the grocery store. Think about the grocery store layout with me for a minute. All of the live food that requires refrigeration is on the outside edges of the grocery store. Everything that doesn't require refrigeration is in the middle. Shop the outside edges of the grocery store. I have another lady who says, if they have to give you a label to tell you what's in it, don't eat it. And if you don't know what's in it, don't eat it. You know, if you can't decipher those words, most likely God didn't make it and you don't need to be ingesting it. So, once God reveals what's death to you in your pot, and I'm not here by any means to tell you what to do, I am simply here to tell you there are ways to do this. There are ways for God's people to get healthy and give you ideas and avenues, and we are certainly at your disposal to be called and ask questions and in any way help, because we believe we're put here to help God raise up a strong army that can move when he says march. But if God shows you what's death in your pot, and that is between you and the Lord, then don't go back to it again. When God says no to something, don't try to go back to Egypt like the Israelites did. They said in the desert, oh, we had it better over there. You know, we had this and cucumbers and leeks, and they cried out and complained to God. But don't go back. You have to go through to get to the promised land. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Okay. We hear about food additives all the time, and I want to talk about them for a minute. 1% of cancer is caused by food additives, but this is what we hear. And we talk about the preservatives, that they're there for antioxidant factors. They're just synthetic antioxidants. Do y'all know what the antioxidants are? They're A, E, C, and selenium. Okay. God's people are listening to the loudest voice, which happens to be the expert. But I don't think somebody can be called an expert unless they have God there too. And the most of the nutritional community is speaking what they think. That's just as far as they've gotten. You know, I haven't revealed the rest to them. And so they find themselves going, oh, well, that was wrong, so we'll go here. But in the meantime, they've shouted to America that we need to change our lives in this direction. I think we can cut out a lot of the swinging back and forth by just going to God and seeing what God says and doing what he says and get on with the truth, because he's the one who ultimately has it. So we listen to the loudest voice in the area and not God in the area of nutrition, and I think we should go to God. So I want to talk about food additives, and when I do, I want to give you a picture. Okay, we hear about all the things that they're sticking in our food, but we go out there, we're worried about sun cancer, so we streak on, you know, sunscreen so we won't get sun cancer. But sun cancer is very low compared to cancer that's diet related. But we're concerned about the lower percentage, so we, you know, do our sunscreen deal. And we sit out there with our sunscreen on, eating Twinkies and drinking Diet Coke. Does that make sense to you? 35% of cancer, 1% of cancer. We've got our focus in the wrong place. And I think God has something to say. Wake up. Return to my way. Hiatal hernias and hemorrhoids are all related to constipation. And hemorrhoids are one side blown out and hiatal hernia is the other. Oh dear, it's just no delicate way to do this. In medical books, they say that pregnancy causes hemorrhoids. But you know, in Africa, the women don't have them. The men do. And I haven't seen a pregnant man. So, nothing wrong. And some of the countries with the most pregnancies have the least hemorrhoids. We have them. They're due to what we're eating, this highly refined stuff that can't come out the way it needs to. All right, everybody's concerned about heart disease, so I want to talk about it for a minute. Heart disease is still being studied. I will say that I have a friend who fed bread to a lady who had uncontrollable cholesterol. The doctor said wash their hands of her. They'd done the diet change, they'd done the equestrian powder stuff, and none of it, it was still rising. They just said some people genetically produce cholesterol. You're one of them. Sorry, there's nothing we can do. So my friend took her on as an experiment. And the lady didn't make bread. She was totally intimidated by the whole baking process. So my friend made bread for her on the deal that she would eat one slice of bread every meal a day for a month and then have her cholesterol checked again. She did. It dropped to 85 points in 1 month. Okay. Another person took the same challenge. Their triglyceride level went down to 50, and I think their cholesterol went down 100. There's something in this bread that works. Right, fiber helps absorb the fat globules and take them out. And I want to talk about this for a minute. But first I want to go to the cholesterol. Cholesterol a fatty deposit that the body cannot use. And so it lines your arteries. It lines your digestive tract. Your body doesn't really know what to do with it. Feel free, please, to stand up and stretch. Those are not the most comfortable chairs. And I don't want you to lose your attention span. So what happens is you get a heart attack because all of this builds up. Because the foods that we eat don't break down the cholesterol into usable parts for the body. It has to be broken into small fat globules, not large ones. And the food that we eat doesn't do that. If it did break down into small enough particles, it would pass through the arteries and be eliminated out of your body. But it can't do that. So it clogs the arteries. It stops the nutrient transfer through the arteries, things going in and out that the blood uses. Do you understand what I'm saying? And it stops what's going on inside your small intestines, which is where your major nutrient transfer takes place. Fiber, when it sucks in the cholesterol and it takes it out, your body makes cholesterol. Everybody's body makes cholesterol. Cholesterol is made from bile salts. Bile is stored in the gallbladder. Okay, made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder. What happens is that when the fiber sucks it out and takes it out, it tells your body to make more. But if you don't do that, then what the body does is it takes that old cholesterol and recycles it. In the meantime, your body is making more and your cholesterol goes up. Does that make sense? I have to stop so we change tapes.
Nice.
Oh, take a break or change tapes?
Both.
Take a break. Okay, we'll take a break. How the fiber traps the cholesterol and takes it out, which stimulates your body to make new cholesterol and use up the bile stores, which is where your cholesterol comes from. So it lowers your cholesterol instead of you recycling old cholesterol and keeping those stores, which keeps your cholesterol high. Okay. Choline and inositol are two B vitamins that are very prevalent in wheat and in the grains. Your nervous system needs them. They need all of these. They need lecithin, choline, and inositol. They're very important to your nervous system. Choline and inositol are key in the production of lecithin. Lecithin is an emulsifier. It breaks down fat into usable parts and helps to lower your cholesterol. They put it in Reese's peanut butter cups. You know how creamy Reese's peanut butter cups are? That's because they're lecithin. I want to address fat-free diets here for a while. I've been on them. Your body has to have fats to survive. It has to have fats to live. And I think these fat-free diets, people are doing more as a weight loss thing than they are as a really healthy thing. Hey, Barbie, they can't hear you. Oh, yeah, there's one down the hall. You'll have to go down there. You can hear them, but they can't hear you. So if you have eliminated fats from your diet, you have to have at least 2 tablespoons of fat a day. And if you eliminate that, you're going to do your body damage. So I'm real careful about these fat-free diets. I think what instead should be done is look back at fats the way God created them and get back to using them as close as you can. More of a problem with the fat-free diet, I think what they're actually doing more so than eliminating fats, so they are doing that, and some people extremely, is think in that sugar thing that the NTI journal that I passed around, who has it?
I have one of them.
Who has the sugar journal? Anybody? You got the sugar one? I'm going to read you this little paragraph, which I'll give it back. I promise. But this really got my attention with these fat-free diets. And fat consumption in the United States has risen by only 12% in the past 70 years, 70. However, during the same time, sugar consumption rose over 700%. By reducing sugar intake, Americans could reduce their cholesterol and triglyceride levels 20 to 40%. So what I think is happening, when you think about this, something that's high in sugar, ice cream, has some fat in it, right? I think so many of our foods that we eat that have fat in them, when we start eliminating fat, what we're really doing is eliminating a lot of sugar. Because all of our high sugar things have some fat in them. So think about that when and chew on it for a while. Okay, so we're back to lecithin. Lecithin, B6, choline, and inositol. Whenever any one of them are gone, your cholesterol will start going up. And according to Adele Davis, who wrote Let's Eat Well and a whole bunch of others, she said since 1910, when machinery began to be seen, that we have seen cholesterol rises in people. Now, she's a biochemist. Doctors sent the cases they could not treat to her, and she treated them biochemically. She's since gone on to be with God, but she's a very, very knowledgeable woman. So what we see is that lecithin is recommended by the National Psoriasis Foundation because it helps combat skin problems. It's very high in B vitamins, and it's wonderful for bread. It makes your bread real soft and real smooth, and it also helps break down fat. So we have high heart disease in this country, high cholesterol. Lecithin helps break down fat. It helps break down cholesterol, which I put in my bread every time I make it because I love my husband, and his father died young of a heart attack, and I don't want him to drop dead of a heart attack, so I put lecithin in my bread because it breaks those fat deposits down. Another thing, speaking of fat deposits in the arteries, is salt. We use natural mineral salt. It's from antediluvian times. It was actually covered over in a glacier slide, and it's a real salt mine. You know, they talk about going off the salt mines, and this is a real one. And I'll pass this around, and you'll actually be able to see the mineral flag in the salt. Well, salt, so many of the things that have come about in our diet have come about because of marketing techniques. Somebody wanted to sell Morton salt, so they came up with when it rains, it pours, right? And they didn't have to put rice in their salt shakers anymore. Well, to do our salt shaker, wherever it is, I'll show you what we do. Here's my salt. It's in a block. It's real full. But when I want to use it, that's what I do, and I'll show you. It's not worth what they're doing to the salt, because what they're doing to the salt is is heated up to 1,600 degrees Fahrenheit. And this makes the salt so hard that it's virtually impervious to the moisture in the air, and it doesn't absorb it, so when it rains, it pours. Well, unfortunately, when you get it inside your body, it's also somewhat impervious to the water. It has to be surrounded by water in order to begin to be absorbed. This is why when you eat something salty, you're so thirsty, because it's taking all the water to go to that salt to try to put it, to dissolve it. Well, it never can totally be dissolved at that heat. It makes it so very hard, it never totally is dissolved. So it goes into your system. When it gets to your arteries and veins, it's sharp and it cuts in your arteries and veins. And then it may leaves a rough spot, and fat comes along, and it has a great place to grab hold and sit. So whenever they have, yeah, those have risen. They've risen up, and they'll rise more in the ovens. I need to be turned into this. Where was I? I totally lost my train.
Salt in your veins.
Salt in your veins. Salt in your veins.
Cholesterol, mineral salt.
Well, I'm way better to work now. No.
The reason you use salt rather than the Morton salt
Is because it doesn't do that. It's higher in minerals. People say, oh, well, what about iodine? Well, you can get iodine in other places in your diet, and I don't worry too much about it. Besides, iodine is an element, and it's in the natural salt, but it's not heavily iodized like they do for boilers and so forth. But we have no boilers, we're fine. So.
What about sea salt?
Sea salt is also heated to a large degree. If your salt doesn't clump together, it's been heat treated.
Where do you get it?
We order it through the co-op. You can get it through the co-op. 25-pound box, 16-pound box, something like that. And believe me, you have salt for a long time. Long time. It's real cheap that way too. If you want to be on our co-op list, be sure and leave me a note somewhere or talk to me later, and I'll put you on it. Right. Yeah, in my brain, believe me, won't hold it today. Diabetes, where there's no fiber, then sugar is quickly absorbed. Diabetes comes about when the pancreas doesn't function the way it's supposed to. Since I lived on the American Diabetes Association diet for 5 years, I'm real familiar with this one. What happens is that when your body eats sugar, your pancreas to produce insulin. And sugar level in your blood goes up, insulin is produced, brings the sugar level down. And that's the way it's supposed to work. However, we eat such high levels of sugar with such low levels of fiber that we have major upswing of sugar, blood sugar. The pancreas over-secretes insulin, brings the blood sugar down, and then your blood sugar level comes even down too low, and then glycogen has to be produced by the liver to bring the blood sugar level back up. So you ride this roller coaster all day long, and you never can stay in balance, and you feel dreadful. Well, ultimately, the pancreas goes, I give up, and it quits, and you're diabetic. And diabetes is heavily related to what we eat, because it's overworking the pancreas, and it simply cannot keep up. Honey is great because it clings with that fiber, and it helps to release that sugar over a slow level, plus honey has everything it needs to be metabolized, and it has a lot of vitamins and minerals in their amino acids. I mean, did y'all look at that list? And what else in honey? So it helps it to be absorbed slowly. There's an island called Nauru in the South Pacific that had rich phosphorus deposits. When these were discovered, the entire island became rich very quickly. And they decided that now that they were wealthy, that they would eat like the Americans, because the Americans know what they're doing. Within a few years, 40% of the adults had adult onset diabetes. The article said it would take another 30 years for the next generation to see the heart disease, diverticulitis, and other diseases that are common to us. Well, I want you to think about this. Apply this to us. I have an 11-year-old. In 30 years, she will be 41. She will be a prime candidate. She's right in the right age to start seeing heart disease and cancer and all sorts of health problems that are common to us. See, this curse hasn't left us yet. It's just so apparent in this other culture because they went from eating coconuts and bananas and mangoes that were hanging on the trees to highly refined food. And all it took was a few years for the fruit of that to be seen. You'll know them by their fruit, right? And so that's what it is. Okay, I'm going to move quickly through the rest of this. Obesity. We're fat because we've taken out everything that's filling. So we overeat. If you sit here and eat this food, you will see you're eating sample pieces and you're getting full because it's filling. And there's a ton of food still left over here, and there's a lot of you in the room. Proverbs says, when you sit down with a ruler, consider carefully what is put before you, and put a knife to your throat if you're a man of great appetite. Do not desire his delicacies, for it is deceptive food. Caleb and Joshua were the only two left out of those 40 years of wandering in the wilderness. They were the two spies who went in and spied out and said, we can take the land. Everybody else said, we look like ants, like grasshoppers, and they're giants, and they all died. Caleb and Joshua, it said that they were just as strong and just as ready to fight on the day that they entered Canaan as the day that they first went in and spied it out. Because they ate according to God's provision. So we know back then that they were searching for white bread, because God said, don't desire this, it's deceptive food. God knew what and warned of its detriment. Daniel stood before the king and made himself a test case for the entire kingdom of Babylon. He said, your young man, they wanted him to eat at the king's table, and he said, he knew that he couldn't do that because it wasn't clean before God. And he said, I want to put an appeal to you. Feed us off the grains and the vegetables and the herbs. And at the end of the month, compare us to the best of your men who eat at the king's table and see who's the strongest. And the king changed everyone to Daniel's diet. They had been eating the rich food, and it was deceptive. It was not life-giving. So we overeat because there's a lack of the nutrients that we need. Remember I talked about white flour, white sugar are pulling things out, and you're craving something all the time. But what you're craving is what your body keeps robbing from you because it's not there in the food that you're eating. This is a real interesting study that was done. For 8 weeks, men were told to eat 12 slices of bread a day. They were given one restriction. They could not to watch their alcohol and their junk food intake. Okay? That was it. At the end of 8 weeks, those who ate white bread lost 13.7 pounds, and those who ate whole wheat bread, this is not real bread, this is whole wheat from the grocery store, 19.4 pounds. 12 slices of bread a day, 3 a meal. Because it filled them up. It filled them up. So, and we're eating extracted foods, and we've talked about that. There's an amino acid called glutamic acid. It's one of its richest sources is wheat, and it has one function, to metabolize sugar. One nutritionist uses it to help people who have severe sugar cravings. This one, I think, is something that you should all know, especially if you have young children. Sugar feeds disease-causing bacteria. If you put them in a petri dish and you sprinkle sugar over them, they're going to grow. It feeds them. It has nothing nutritionally to offer except calories. But honey, we talked about, has something else. So I'll tell you a little bit about honey, and then I'll have to get to what has really got me excited right now. Honey is a really good alternative. Tupelo honey only grows in the around the Gulf of Mexico, Alabama, and those panhandle of Florida, and a little bit of Louisiana and Alabama. So it's a more expensive honey because it has a smaller growing area. That's the only place in the United States that it grows. It's a honey that comes from a tree. It doesn't sugar. It's very light and clear. The rule of thumb of honey is the darker it is, the more minerals it has. The lighter it is, the less minerals it has. But the darker one is stronger tasting, and the lighter one is not. So I have them down here to show you. Well, just so you won't think I'm cheating because of the light or the amount of honey. This is wildflower, and this is clover. Can you see the difference? This one's real dark. I put this one in my breads that I'm cooking. I use this one for table honey, and I use it for icing and things like that, because it doesn't have a strong flavor. Minerals are not generally heat sensitive, so they're not destroyed by heat, whereas more vitamins are destroyed by heat than minerals. So I use this one to get good mineral content into my kids, and I use this for table honey.
What if you need tuberose from a tree?
Tuber-
Bees don't make it?
Bees make it, but the source is the blossom is from a tree, and it doesn't sugar it as badly, whereas clover is, like grass stuff on the ground. Clover sugars badly. But if your honey sugars, you just take a pot of water and you heat it up on the stove until it stings. Don't ever get it to boiling. Take it off and put your honey down into it, and it will resuspend. The crystals will go away, and it will be liquid again. But you don't ever want to put it in boiling water because you'll kill it. You'll kill the nutrients in it. I spoke to the honey expert at the University of Georgia, whose name I cannot remember, and talked to him about raw honey and pasteurized honey. And he said the major problem with pasteurized honey is that most of the honey comes in from third world countries, or it comes in, I think the major importer place from which we import is China. But anyway, they don't have the technology to pasteurize it correctly, and so they heat it up. You're supposed to heat it up real quickly and cool it down real quickly, and that's supposed to prevent sugaring. But they don't have the technology to do it, and so the honey has a burn taste. Well, I found this to be true. We knew when we started eating the raw honey that it just tasted better. But I went out to make donuts for my parents one morning, and I was making honey butter, just equal parts of butter and honey, for my parents. And I had run out of my honey bear, and Mother had some Subi, which is a nice quality clover honey. And when I got through, I licked, did her little thing and licked it, and I could taste the burn taste. See, we're so used to the burn taste that we can't taste it until you get off of it, and then you can tell that you're eating burnt honey. Okay, Tupelo is especially high in levulose, which is very good for diabetics, and we talked about the antibacterial qualities. I have a friend who knows someone who went up to Mayo Clinic, I think, for cancer treatment, and they told her to eat Tupelo honey. We don't know why, they just told her to eat Tupelo honey, so I'll throw that out there for what it's worth. We've talked about using it in moderation. There was a study done. 14 healthy children were fed the equivalent of 2 cupcakes for breakfast. And sometime later, they noticed that their adrenaline was 10 times normal. They were hyperactive. Now, some say that sugar is not related to hyperactivity, but I defy the medical community to say that to any mother with children.
The study that was done on that was funded by donor sugar.
Oh, well, that's why. But, these kids fly high on adrenaline, and then they crash. And we're seeing little kids depressed because they skyrocketed, and then they come down. And so whatever you have around the house, your children are going to eat. If you've got junk food that's highly refined, they're going to eat that. If this is all you have, like what we're showing you today, then that's what they're going to eat because that's what you've got. So it's really, really awesome when you think of God's creation. Did you know a statistician wrote that Joseph seating his brothers in the correct order was awesome, there were 40 million possibilities. And the food that this earth produces did not produce by accident. God made our bodies. He put what He made for us here on the earth as good to eat. And then we try to change it into something else so that it's more attractive or it tastes better or whatever. And what we're doing is making death in our own bodies. I want you to keep this in mind while I'm talking. Vitamin E is necessary for the formation of the nucleus of each body cell, including RNA and DNA. Furthermore, the essential fatty acids are now known to form not only part of the internal structure and wall of every cell in the body, but also the connective tissue between all the cells. When a lack of vitamin E allows these acids to combine with oxygen, they break down and cause the cell to disintegrate. He's taking my podium. Our intake of this vitamin has been estimated to have been 150 units daily before wheat germ was discarded during the milling of flour. It now averages 7.4 units. And she supposed in here that as our diet became more and more refined, that would drop. And remember I said the last printing of this was in the 70s. 150 units, it was at 7.4 in the 70s, where do you think it is now? Virtually non-existent. Okay, so vitamin E appears to have only one function, and that is to prevent fatty acids and fat-like substances from oxidation. You asked what is a fat-like substance? What about a fat-soluble vitamin? Vitamin D, vitamin A. E itself is a fat-soluble vitamin. Fatty acids are components of fats and, as I said, a component of every cell wall, of the internal structure of the cell, the connective tissue that holds those cells together, and they're all critically dependent on fatty acids. Plus, they're responsible for many, many cellular functions. Many of the jobs they do are dependent on fatty acids. They have information coming into and going out of the cell. They deliver information to the organs. Because of their role in the body, they are chemically structured to readily bind with other chemical structures. For instance, a fatty acid will bind with a protein to make the wall of the cell. All right? If you're asking what a fatty acid is, have anybody ever heard of omega-3? Linolenic, linoleic. Okay, all of those are fatty acids, and there are more besides, but those are the ones most people are familiar with. The fatty acids, because they readily bind with others, they can also readily bind with, this is important, know what that is? You might take chemistry. Oxygen. Readily binds with oxygen. Okay? And this is the problem. Also, they can bind with this. And I don't know the chemical symbol for the other than H. Okay? That's what's on the periodic table. So the role of vitamin E is to protect the fatty acids as they are going through the body from binding with either of these in the body. All right? You think oxygen is present in your body? It's everywhere. Okay? So that it can deliver the fatty acid to the cell, so there it can bind with the cell and do the job that it needs to do. So the antioxidants that you're taking, A, C, and E, vitamin E protects all your antioxidants. Okay, vitamin E is an antioxidant. When the fatty acid binds with vitamin E, it is delivered to the cell. The fatty acid is delivered to the cell. It can come and bind with the cell and do its job. Vitamin E, which has protected this to get it here, then breaks away. Okay? Not there anymore. It's gone away. I know this sounds complex, but this is such a cool thing. I want you to see it. So, if vitamin E binds with oxygen, do you know what it makes? Which are toxic to your body. That's why you're all taking antioxidant pills, to protect your body free radicals. That's a free radical. It does damage to your body. Easy layman's way to put it is it rusts your body away from the inside. Okay, that's what it's doing. So, they are ravagers and cause great havoc. The peroxides are believed to be responsible for one-way tumors are begun. If this cell wall is messed up because the fatty acids are bound with oxygen, when they're done, guess what they're going to do? They're going to oxidize the protein which makes up that cell wall. And it's going to do that. It destroys it. And that's one way a tumor can be formed. Cells have something called contact inhibition, which is they touch each other. They communicate by rubbing up against each other. Kind of like the body of Christ, you know, we're all part of one body. We're supposed to rub up against each other. You're okay, I'm okay, you know, all's well, share each other's burdens, all of that. But normally this cell membrane is very supple, you know, it's movable. And it has the ability to talk and transfer information to that other cell. Now, if a tumor is formed, if this is damaged, what you're going to get is a very hard, thick membrane. And they can't communicate with each other. And all of a sudden, the cells around it go, it's missing. We better create more. And that's cancer. Anybody heard of that? Cancer is cells that are out of control multiplying, right? And that's what's happening. Okay. So, I'm trying to think of where I want to go now. Vitamin E is going to protect these fatty acids to get here. And it's a very, very important process. So if the cell membrane is weakened by this lack of fatty acids because they've been oxidized, then the cell can be weakened to the point that it erupts and the insides come out and the cell has just died. This is what happens in the natural aging process. Cells die. But they are constantly being reproduced by the body in a balance. When they reproduce prolifically, they're out of balance and we have a problem. If the cells are so weakened that they're dying faster than they're reproducing, you are aging prematurely. It's going to affect the organs that those cells make up. It can even cause death. It will cause a total malfunction of that organ sooner or later. What if the cells that are dying faster than they're being reproduced are your muscle cells? Anybody ever heard of this? Jerry's kids, right? Adele Davis used massive doses of vitamin E and cured multiple muscular dystrophy.
You won't hear the doctors talking about it.
No, you won't, because the doctors don't study nutrition. And they freely admit that they do not study nutrition. Our children in America are not as strong as they used to be when we ate on whole grains. When I first started milling grains, I was doing it in a Vitamix, and I was pregnant with my firstborn. And when she was born, she raised her head off my shoulder the day she was born, and my father just about freaked out. Look at that baby! And I'm sure it was because I was using a Vitamix to grind up, you know, my grain. At that time, there was no such thing as a whisper mill. I didn't know about those. And I was unhappy with the Vitamix because it never ground up the grain very well. I had chunks and pieces. But I was using whole grains even back then. And I know it made a difference in both of my children. They were both uniquely strong when they were born. What if those weak muscles cause internal hemorrhaging? Or what if they cause a weak place on the wall of your heart? What does that produce? Aneurysms. What if it's the main vein in your leg? Normally, 90% of the blood returning from your feet to the heart goes through a large vein in the center of your leg. And if the cells in that vein are breaking down faster than they're reproducing, then the blood gets sluggish because clot is developing and cannot flow freely. Dr. Wilfred Shute, who pioneered a lot of he's an MD, pioneered a lot of the research on vitamin E, absolutely conclusively proved that vitamin E was essential to prevent clot formation.
Can it also prevent that a deal?
Uh-huh. If it is related to the breaking down of something. So if the clot is in your leg from this process, you've got all this backlog of gunk, it can't efficiently slough off and be cleaned out, then 90% of that block has got to be diverted somewhere else in your body, right? And smaller capillaries and veins take it over, and you get these funny little lines in your legs. What are they called? Varicose veins. Those veins are bulging because they're carrying more blood volume than they were intended to carry. Okay? Adele Davis speaks of a woman who was crippled with varicose veins so badly they were going to amputate her legs. And approximately 2 weeks later, after she put her on megadoses of vitamin E, she walked into the office. Dr. Shute has proven this, and so have others. What if the red blood cells are the ones that are being destroyed by this process? Anemia. That no amount of iron can cure. Because that's not the problem. The problem isn't that your blood cells aren't taking up enough iron, it's that you don't have enough red blood cells. Okay? One lady in Knoxville said that she had been anemic all her life. The only change that she made was milling her bread. When she went to the doctor after she began this process, the doctor said that she was not anemic, and it was the only change she had made. She said it's got to be the bread. What if it's the myelin sheath that's destroyed through this process? What will that produce? Multiple sclerosis has also been corrected with vitamin E. Now, I'm not suggesting you take megadoses of vitamin E. It is fat soluble. However, I do not think that it would be very hard for you to take a megadose and overdose on vitamin E, even though it's fat soluble, because it's used up. And I'll talk about that in a second. Fatty acids bind to the substance to make prostaglandins. They are similar to hormones, except a hormone is secreted and goes throughout your body. A prostaglandin is used within the cell in which it's made. All right, that's the only difference. But one of the pathways that the fatty acids take, one of the key prostaglandins they make, are called, anybody ever seen this one? Thromboxanes. Thromboxanes constrict your arteries, your veins, and they clot your blood. The secondary pathway that these fatty acids take is binding to make procyclins, which do the opposite. They thin your blood and dilate the arteries. Somehow, the typical American diet feeds this more than it feeds the others. And we have people who are living on blood thinners because they're in danger of a heart attack from clots in their blood. Okay? Dr. Wilfred Shute, who pioneered the research on vitamin E and heart disease, said, and I just was so excited when I found this, historically, it is irrefutable that when new and more efficient methods were introduced into the manufacture of wheat flour, those methods permitting for the first time the complete stripping away of the highly perishable wheat germ, the diet of Western man lost its only significant source of vitamin E. Flour milling underwent this great change around the turn of the century, and it was general around 1910. The amount of vitamin E in the diet was greatly reduced, and with the loss of this natural antithrombin, coronary thrombosis appeared on the scene. 1910. How many people do you know who suffer from heart disease? He says that it appeared because you were fine on flour. He treated people for over 30 years with vitamin E and saw some amazing results. Once again, he doesn't mention grinding your own, but why not do it in its original form, in its safest means? It's inexpensive, it's perfectly balanced, God created it. Why take the pill and pay somebody a lot more when you can make bread for pennies and get it the way that it's intended to be? And I told you about a quote that I had, to eat only what God created is good for your food. Eat it as close to the way God made it as you possibly can. Dr. Rex Russell wrote this book called The Bible About Healthy Living, and out of all the books that I have read through the last 20-something years, I would say this is the only book I can say I have no disagreement with. He does not go into the detail that I'm going into on the oils and the meat and the breads and so forth, but he gives you a great overview of wonderful information. He is an MD. I've had the opportunity to speak to him on the telephone. He has a copy of my cookbook. He's sending people to me from Arkansas to get my cookbook.
It's a wonderful piece of information. He adds one rule to my rules, and that was avoid food addiction. But his third rule is, and the only way that a housewife in Georgia and a medical doctor could come up to the same information is because we serve the same big God. So you cannot find Dr. Schuetz said our only significant source of vitamin E was removed with the refining of our flour. How many of your cells need it? How many need the vitamin E? All. All your cells need it. But even if you're getting the fatty acids, without the vitamin E to protect it, to get it to the cell, it's not doing you any good. Another pathway that fatty acids bind through the bloodstream is with cholesterol, which we've talked about a little bit. The fatty acids and the cholesterol become the precursors for every hormone in your body, which I've mentioned. Your sex hormones, your steroids, your anti-inflammatories, and the list goes on and on and on. So guess what happens in America? The fatty acids are oxidized because there's no vitamin E, it's been removed, and cholesterol can't get where it needs to be. So the problem I have with the no-fat and low cholesterol diets is that cholesterol is essential to life. You've got to have it to survive. Your brain's made up of it, you know? Are those brain cells being regenerated? Yeah. Aren't your cells regenerated as you grow, as you go through life? So you got to have it. Is it any wonder that corticosteroids are on the scene and they're being used for everything? How many of y'all have been put on a steroid for your nose or your toes or something? Yeah, you have. Your body cannot make them on a typical American diet. It doesn't have what it needs. Is it any wonder we have so many female and male hormone imbalances and related diseases, like infertility? Because this protects all your sex hormones too, and you're not getting it in your diet. The body combines fatty acids with cholesterol to make your pituitary hormone, your adrenal hormones, everything, and it's a precursor for vitamin D. Your body can synthesize vitamin D, but you got to have this present for it to do it. Vitamin D is critical for the absorption of calcium. Y'all seen calcium supplements with vitamin D in them? Now we're dealing with osteoporosis. Is this rampant in our society? Do you see how it all comes back to give us to stay our daily bread? Hypertension. We've talked about that, high blood pressure. The cycle is never ending because we're falling apart at the cellular level, because we're not eating what God created for us to eat. The fatty acids combine to control ulcers because they make up the stomach lining. If you're breaking down cells on your stomach faster than they can be reproduced, you've got a raw spot, and that's an ulcer. Asthma. Lack of fatty acids leads to normal constricting of the bronchial tubes. Teeth decay. Fatty acids make up the surface of your teeth. And here was a big one for me, allergies. Fatty acids form the parts of the cell structure that breaks down in the absence of vitamin E. And then the cells become porous, and viruses and allergens can pass easily through them and penetrate them. Eating is something you just had to choke down.
Yeah.
My husband is back there stuffing his mouth with garlic breadsticks, I know. That and the Reuben bread are his favorites. It prevents premature births. It prevents pulmonary embolisms and strokes. It will bring the thyroid into balance, and the nodules on the thyroid often disappear. It's essential if you're taking hormones, and I think you can see why. Your hormones are not going to be as effective without it. Infants who are on formula are on limited minerals and nutrition. Vitamin E is very essential for them. It burns, scars. It helps to restore the tissue to new. Catherine closed her thumb in the hinge side of Tom's van door, his work van, very heavy, when she was a kid, and literally exploded the pad of her thumb. And for various and reasons, we could not get her to a doctor. And so by the time the plastic surgeon saw it, he said, well, it's healing up, just let it heal. And because it was her left thumb and she's left-handed, I rubbed vitamin E oil into that all the time. And because I didn't want her to have pain or discomfort holding her pencil, and she's done fine. I've just got too much to cover. What? Somebody said that. No? Okay, I'm hearing things. I want to talk about meats because there's some disturbing things to be said, particularly among the body of Christ. That scripture that I read in Genesis 1:29 about everything that bears seed is here for man's good, I agree with. But I think we can see some dangers in being totally vegetarian. as we've talked about. Adele Davis says that vegetarians are very prone to paralysis, which is irreversible by a lack of vitamin B12. They do not get it. You have to get it from an animal source. And because they don't take that up, that they can come to a form of paralysis that cannot be reversed. And I know that the people who are in the Christian camp of vegetarianism, and there's a particular organization in the Southeast that promotes that, have just come out in their publication saying, well, we've been looking at this vitamin B12 deficiency, and they've decided they need to supplement it. I think we're better off getting it from food. Yeah.
Going back to what you said about the pork fats and animal fats, why is that to decrease breast cancer?
He didn't say why. He just said that it was. I'm throwing it out. I heard him lecture.
And who is this? Yeah.
Robert Barefoot. He has a book out. I know he has a book on calcium. You can look him up on the internet.
The book,
It's Barefoot.
the book that he said the thing.
It wasn't a book. I heard him speak.
Okay.
I believe God put everything here very see for our good. But I have a question for you. What happened in Genesis 1 that changed in Genesis 3?
Fall.
Yeah. We don't live in the Garden of Eden anymore, do we? There's been a fall. Are we still in an unfallen state? No. Can we apply Genesis 1:29 strictly to ourselves today in today's world? I don't think so. In Genesis 9:3-4, after the flood, when they come off the ark, God tells Noah to eat meat, but not to eat blood. Why? Because the life is in the blood, right? So not to eat the blood. Then we hear, don't eat any red meat, especially don't eat any meat, and don't especially eat red meat. Well, I have a problem with that. You want to know why? What's lamb?
Red meat.
Red meat. And what does the Passover consist of? Lamb. It's symbolic of the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. So once again, Jesus ate lamb. I have a problem with people telling me, no, red meat. Now, I think there's some things done to our meat that we should definitely look at. But I'm talking here about the people who are coming out in the Church of Christ, and they're saying, thus saith the Lord, thou shalt be vegetarian. Thou shalt not eat red meat. Thou shalt this and thou shalt that. But it's not in the Bible. So once again, this is where I go back to the Word of God and go, wait a minute. That doesn't bear out with what this is saying. In the New Testament, Paul said in Romans 14:2-3, one man has faith that he may eat all things, but he who is weak eats vegetables only. Let him not who eats regard with contempt him who does not eat, and let not him who does not eat judge him who eats, for God has accepted them both. See, I have no problem if you want to be vegetarian, but do not stand up there and proclaim that this is thus saith the Lord, because it's not. Not today. Maybe we'll get back there in the millennial kingdom when the lion lays down with the lamb, but not yet. This was like circumcision to the Gentiles, The Gentiles had been grafted into the vine. They didn't have all these laws that the Jews did. So they're eating meat, and the Jews are going, no, you can't eat that. And Paul's going, chill. Okay? They have a different background. They're coming into this, and we're not going to let it destroy the body of Christ over what you're going to eat and drink. So that was the perspective. Now, I think that there are some clean and there are some healthy issues about what we eat and what we don't eat. For instance, when God gave Moses the law, he gave specifics of clean and unclean meats. And I believe they were known before that by Noah, because you'll see that God told Noah to take one of every unclean kind of animal, one set, but 7 of the clean. So I think Noah had to know what was clean and unclean even before the law was given. However, Dr. Russell has come up with some interesting research on this whole thing. I don't know if I can find it. This would be interesting to see if I can find it. I always lose it. I need to write down what page it's on. Okay. It's called The Meat to Eat in here. Okay? Now, let me tell you, I'm just going to share my opinions with you. This is my opinion. Okay? The rest I've been giving you is scientific fact. This is my opinion. So you can throw this out if you want to. It won't hurt my feelings. But I'm just going to share with you some of the things that I have gleaned on the information that I have researched. And people, they'll put up their dukes with me about this, and they'll get real mad at me on this one. Because I do talk about clean and unclean meats. Am I saying that you're not going to go to heaven if you eat unclean meats? No. but you may get there sooner. Okay, so this is my conviction. Dr. Russell talks about a study that was done at Johns Hopkins in 1953 and reported the toxic effect of animal flesh on a controlled growth culture. Okay, they're growing something in a petri dish. And he says a substance was classified as toxic if it slowed the culture's growth rate below 75%. In each case, the blood of the animal he tested showed up more toxic than the flesh. So here we go, the life's in the blood, don't eat the blood. So the following table is based on Dr. Mott's study. His results show that the lower the growth percentage of the culture, the more toxic the flesh. Note that the flesh of animals and fish are given to us by God for food are all non-toxic. But all forbidden animals lie in the toxic range. Isn't it interesting when medical science finally catches up with the Word of God?
Yeah.
Oh, he's got to change things. Oh, I think I'll pass.
Where does Pam come into this?
Pardon me?
Where does Pam slip in there?
Pam?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what. You take the quiz in the front on your knowledge of what's good for you and what's not, and read the answer in the back. Actually, I'll read you the one on.
How about crab legs?
I will read you the one on pork, okay? He said, are we back on time? He says, pork. Scripture mentions pork many times and always having a negative connotation. The pig's flesh is described as putrid, filthy, or unclean. Humans classify pork as red meat, but the Bible groups pork with blood, bowel movements, roadkill, buzzards, snakes, rats, and roaches. In my opinion, eating pork may be the most damaging item on this list. Give yourself 5 points for getting this one right. All the others are worth a point. So I'll leave that one open right there for you. Now,
Are you going to go into the digestive system too, like how the pig is on the
Yes.
things in the hour?
well,
And that's why the
the things I'll talk about pork are this. In the book, he mentions pigs being raised in cages, and that, they're stacked, and that the pigs on the bottom can live off the offal of the pigs on top. So, that's pork for you, okay? Also, pork runs a great risk of trichinosis from the trichina worm, and today we have figured out a way to quickly be able to cook pork and not be subject to trichinosis by adding sodium nitrates to bacon and things like that. Unfortunately, when nitrates are heated, they become a form of poison. And so you heat up the bacon and you turn that nitrate into poison and then you eat it. Fresh pork doesn't have nitrates, but the trichina, the worm itself, can encapsulate itself. I heard one nutritionist say up to 500 and something degrees. It can encapsulate itself against the heat and live through that process. Then you eat it and you get the trichina, which causes trichinosis. So I just don't think it's worth the risk, okay? And I believe if God put down clean and unclean, there was a reason. Does God tell us not to go commit adultery because he hates us or because he knows that it's going to cause us physical and emotional damage? Do we trust him or do we not? You can do it your own way. You can do anything your own way, but what's it going to bring you? There's a way which seems right and ends on nice, and the way ends in death. You can do it however you want to do it. That's what I'm telling you. This is my opinion, okay? But from what I've read, I think we would be so much wiser to read what God says and go do it. Now, hang on just a minute, Eddie. Let me get to the end of this and I'll come back. I find it interesting that this is such a major issue. People get mad with me. And I mean, really, people have gotten mad with me when I've mentioned this. And I don't just go around spouting this. I only talk about this at class or if somebody asks me would I like, a piece of ham. I'll say, no, thank you. Oh, don't you like ham? And then it'll start coming out. But anyway, but I believe that there has to be some sort of spiritual stronghold here, even if it is only submitting our desires, including our taste buds, to the Lordship of Christ. Now, there's a scripture in Philippians 3:10, and it says, it's talking before this, but the part I extruded was, whose end is destruction, whose God is their belly, and whose glory is their shame, who set their minds on earthly things. So you can do it your way. It's not going to pay you off for eternity.
What is that scripture?
Philippians 3:10. So actually the scripture could apply to this entire seminar. So am I saying it's sin for you to go eat ham? No. Or bacon? No, it's not. Paul said all things are permissible, but not all things are beneficial. So, he didn't say legally you couldn't do it in the New Testament. In Luke 10:10, when Jesus sent out the 70, he said, "And whatever city you enter, and they receive you, eat what is set before you." So that sounds contradictory, doesn't it? But it's not. You know why? Because what I practice in my home is very different from what I will do when I'm out. Now, there are times I go to people and they've asked us over for dinner, and that wife has worked hard and she's cooked a beautiful pork roast, and I'm going to bless it. I am going to believe God that no deadly harmful thing will hurt me, and I'm going to eat it. Unless God tells me not to, I will eat that thing. Why? Because the fellowship of the brothers is more important than the legalistic stand of what I eat or don't eat. And besides, this is like eating through the drive-through manna gatherer, you know. If you got to do it occasionally, but over here I'm doing this on a regular basis, so it kind of balances out in the end. Is that a license to sin? To go out and eat that way all the time? Not when I know better. I'm accountable for what I know, aren't I? That it's up to me to practice that thing. So, does this make sense to you? When in the past, when I prayed about this, I was like, Lord, what do I tell people? I mean, you know, they get so angry with me. And he took me to Malachi, and it says, "I'm the Lord thy God, I change not." That's the Old Testament. In Hebrews 13, it says, Jesus Christ, the same, yesterday, today, and forever. Has God changed his mind? I don't think so. Inevitably, when I talk about this, people go, "Well, what about Peter's vision at Joppa? That was unclean stuff. It all comes down on the blanket, and you know, rise, Peter, kill and eat." But you know, if you read that whole thing in context, it has absolutely nothing to do with food. It has to do with why us non-Jews are Christians. It was the bringing in of Cornelius' household, the first conversion of Gentiles, bringing them into the body of Christ. And as a matter of fact, in Acts 10:28, Peter says to them in Cornelius' household, "You yourselves know how unlawful it is for a man who is a Jew to associate with a foreigner or to visit him. Yet God has shown me that I should not call any man unholy or unclean." So when I asked the Lord, what do I tell him? He said, "You tell him Jesus' death on the cross did not change the physical makeup of pork." So, now, that's my spiel, that's my particular opinion. You can do with it what you want, but I've made a case for you to chew on and pray over, okay? If it's truth, I'll give it to you as truth. If it's my opinion, I'll give it to you as my opinion. That is my opinion. All right. We eat very healthy now, but if I were facing a disease of some kind, cancer, or, you know, specifically cancer, I would eat differently, because I believe that there is something called therapeutic nutrition. And if you were facing a serious life-threatening disease, then you may have to make some changes. I personally have had to make some of these changes in the last 12 years. When my youngest daughter was born, I contracted an infection in the hospital, which did not show itself for 6.5 years. I just had recurring sinus infections. I knew something was very wrong, but it took me 6.5 years to find a doctor who ended up being in Augusta, Georgia, to be able to find out what was wrong with me. And I found out that everything traced itself back to that infection. When the infection, eating the bread actually strengthened my immune system enough that I quit having sinus infections. The knots that were like marbles up and down my legs went away from my immune system being so depleted. And probably, my husband and I believe, saved me from a hysterectomy. But when the infection was, the bread helped to push the infection back to the uterus where it incubated for several years. And when it exploded, it literally exploded, I put on 35 pounds in a 3-month period of time. I felt like somebody had built a fire inside of me. I called this doctor, and his nurse practitioner diagnosed me over the telephone. No doctor in my town knew what was wrong with me. And so I had to do some dietary things. Right now, God healed me of the infection. I knew it was going to be a God thing. I went to the Lord and I said, after it was diagnosed, it had a name, you know, it was real. It was not my imagination, which I had told over and over and over again. And I just told Tom, I said, okay, look, this is real and so forth, and if God will get all the glory. I came home and I prayed, and the Lord took me to Jeremiah, and it said, I am the Lord, the God of all flesh. I mean, you seen those movie letters that just come off the screen like that? That's what all flesh did. It just grew off the page in my face. Is anything too difficult for me? And I knew that God would heal me, but it took 5 years of trusting God, of going through the treatment. My husband decided, yes, we would do the treatments. My doctor told me I would never be cured, that it was impossible to be cured. 2 years ago, he said to me, "You're disease-free. You're cured." And he knows that God did it, and I know that God did it. Now, there are some side effects from that I'm still dealing with, one of which is systemic yeast. I can't live 10 years on antibiotics, and I have some major yeast problems. So I'm having to make some adjustments in my diet to fight this thing. So if you're in a specific health thing, you need to make those, then you go and do what you need to do, and unless the Lord takes you in a different direction. But definitely seek Him first as to what you are to do and where you are to go. About seafood, as far as meats go, and shellfish is scripturally unclean. I was doing some research on shellfish not too long ago, and they were talking about a bay that had been polluted. Actually, it had typhus in the water. And they checked the shellfish when the initial spill, when the initial typhus was found, and then they checked it a couple months later, and the concentration of the shellfish had risen by 500%. Shellfish are there to filter the water. That's what they do. And because God doesn't want us to get the nasty stuff, then He's trying to spare us. Also, I don't know.
You really want to know what makes
My
it
father-
taste good? The butter and the cocktail sauce and everything else.
Yeah. My father,
For the grand lake.
the Colonel said everything that I love is either illegal, immoral, or bad. Where did I put my pen? Losing it. Well, this is not my diagram, and I meant to do this when we were doing vitamin E, but since we're kind of jumping from thing to thing, before I get into the oil, I want to share this with y'all. Can you listen up, please, because I can't talk over you. I don't have the voice for it anymore. All right. We've talked about oxygen and that it destroys, right? And we've talked about the essential fatty acids, and they have a job to do, yes. And we've talked about how they're linked with